Hello, everybody. This is Lowell Shepard here with the Never Too Late Academy. Welcome to our first ever podcast, which is going to be available to our annual and our monthly members each month, featuring themes and special guests and giving you some inside information, the scoop on stuff that's going on, and alerting you to content and giving you new content each month as well through the podcast. So, welcome. A limited version of this is going to be available to all of our subscribers on the email list. So we welcome you as well. If you want to know a bit more, please sign up and become a member of the Academy. And also we'll be doing some shorts off of this as well to go into our social media platforms for our followers there. But this is our very first one, kicking off with 2023. I'm delighted that Esteban is here with me. Esteban has joined the Academy. He's our chief marketing officer, but brings great experience, not only in marketing, but from big challenges. He worked for Red Bull for many years, organizing some fairly spectacular events. And we're going to talk more about that today and in months to come. And also today, I'm actually not on my boat at the moment, where I spend the majority of my time. I'm actually in a writing room I have rented for a very low price in the hot spring town of Beppu. I'm just about 45 minutes from my boat. I have a book contract to write a book called Dare to Dream, and it's a companion book to the television series with the History Channel, which we're now going into season 1 filming in March, having filmed the pilot last year. And I'll tell more in this podcast about the book itself, but this is where I am. And Esteban, where are you?
Thanks a lot, Lowell. First of all, Happy New Year to everyone. I'm happy to join the Never Too Late Academy family. And yeah, right now I'm actually at my office in my home, close to Enoshima, just south of Tokyo. And looking forward to start this new year with new challenges and new opportunities that we have ahead.
Yeah, and I look forward to getting you to tell more of your story in the months forward as we do this podcast, because everybody Esteban has some secrets, and some of his secrets include that he's actually a pilot, and that he is proof that it's never too late to start early with your dreams. So he's accomplished a lot of his dreams already. But one of the things I love to do each year when I bring in the new year is do what Canadians call, and perhaps in other countries as well, the annual polar bear swim. It's where usually on New Year's Day, for me, it's sometime in the month of January, where I go dive into ocean frigid waters. And it's kind of a spiritual experience. It's a shock treatment, obviously, but it's a way of saying goodbye to the previous year and welcoming the new year in. And the first time I did it with Pacific Solo was 2 years ago at Enoshima at the beach, not far from where you live, Esteban. Last year I was stuck on an island, a beautiful island, Ikijima, because I had my accident at sea, and so I went and did a solo polar bear swim. But this year we're going to do it at Enoshima again. Unfortunately, I contracted a sore throat, couldn't do it. But Esteban, you did the 2023 Pacific Solo and Never Too Late Academy polar bear swim. How was it?
Yeah, actually, it was pretty interesting. To be honest, I have never tried something like that similar to that. And I'm really actually not really used to cold, like in general. I grew up in a very warmer place in Costa Rica most of my early life. And yeah, I just decided to actually invite a few friends. And one of my friends came over on Saturday. And we were just saying, well, we're already here. Why don't we actually give it a try? And it was actually pretty interesting because it was not that bad. It was more uh, I will say it ended up being more of a mental challenge rather than, like the physical aspect of it. So I was actually quite nervous before that, thinking about it like, oh, like this, like it doesn't seem like that easy to just jump into the water on the middle of winter. But we were like, you know what? Let's go ahead and give it a try. New year, new challenges. And it ended up being like actually not that bad. It ended up being very interesting. We had a lot of fun. Me and my friend actually ended up staying like swimming and having fun for way more time than we expected. We were thinking, oh, we're just gonna go in and take a couple of pictures and then get out. And by the end, actually, my friend was like jumping in and doing cartwheels, and and we were just actually hanging out and having fun, like 2 10-year kids on the sea. And yeah, it was very interesting because it kind of reminded me the idea that a lot of the challenges are actually more uh, like you have a roadblock or you have like a wall on your mind rather than on a physical roadblock. And it's all about getting on the right mindset, getting on that positive attitude of, get try to get out of your comfort zone, and that's when actually very interesting things can happen. And this was one of those interesting stories. Actually, we just went out ahead and we said, you know what, let's try this, let's do it. And yeah, it was actually pretty cool, pretty interesting.
I think you're right about the mental roadblock as we surmise certain things about certain challenges. But I think to accomplish goals and even strange goals, audacious goals, goals that have where there's a fear threshold, it's a mental block. And sometimes that mental block is just because although we know something, we know the facts about something, we haven't imbibed that fact because if we did, it'd liberate us to do it. For example, you already commented about the water wasn't as cold as you thought, because in reality, the water temperature is warmer than the air temperature. Now, of course, it's different when you're in the water because you coat your skin. I can't speak to all the physiological aspects of that, but I've experienced the same. Every time you go in the water, it's actually not bad. And living on a boat, people ask me, "Don't you get cold in the winter and hot in the summer?" Well, I do get cold in the winter and hot in the summer. I've now been through 2 winters. Well, living on the boat, I've been through 4 winters actually, and then in the summer as well, 3 summers. But the thing is that because I'm sleeping below the waterline and the boat isn't insulated that well, the inside of the boat down below is the basically same temperature as the sea outside, which is always more moderate. So the fact that if you realize that, it's actually not as big as a. So part of the dealing with the mental block, I think, is information and
Hmm.
and imbibing that information. So we're going to talk more about that coming. Now I'm on a chair that keeps sinking. I'm going to just raise it up again. Oh, there we go. And you may. Oh, there we go. Dropped again. But actually, I'm excited with the next podcast coming up because we're going to be having another Never Too Later and one of the founders of the Academy, Harry Hill. And we'll talk more about him later. And it'd be great, you and I talking to him about, what it takes to fight the fight to realize an audacious goal. He is a successful entrepreneur. He led Japan's largest electronic retailer for many years. And then, maybe 4 or 5 years ago, he realized his dream, and that is to be a gym owner. He's always been into martial arts, and he obtained the license for UFC Gym Japan. He now has 2 locations, and he's training people. And in fact, he's told me he wants me to go into a cage with him and fight because I'm in one of his classes. He's my coach. And that will be an interesting experience. So I'm looking forward to the next podcast. But this is meant to be the introductory one, everybody. We're kind of testing the systems. We actually tried to record this once and we ran into a technical difficulty. So we're doing it again. And hopefully you'll bear with us as we produce these podcasts in time to come. And excuse me if my eyes dart around because I'm still taking in all the scene around me and trying to get used to talking with a mic and headphone on. So, what have you been up to other than the polar bear swim the first 3 weeks of 2023?
So yeah, besides that, we were also doing a little bit of the marketing plans for Never Too Late Academy, and doing a little bit of cleaning as well on the house and backyard. Just getting ready to start like a fresh new year. I always like to do a little bit of cleaning on the house, and we were also trying to clean up the backyard for my son who is about to turn 1 year old,
Oh,
and we
congratulations.
want him to start crawling, and he really loves to be on the backyard and he wants to just crawl everywhere. So we were getting like everything like baby proof and ready for him to start exploring.
Good. Good. Hey, and I wanted to say as well to everybody that some of the podcasts coming up, there's Harry Hill, the next one, but we have other guests lined up for 2023. And another episode I'm really excited about is you and another Never Too Later, one of our founders, Ryan, who's in the human resources world at a fairly high level. And everybody, Esteban and Ryan, are going to do a special podcast with me, talking about it's never too late to change careers or to go for a promotion, or and because we're in Japan, April is the year when new grads go to their new jobs as well. So Esteban has recently came out of corporate into startup, and so that's a big step for him. And Ryan has he's advised thousands of senior candidates of how to progress their career, et cetera, et cetera. So that's one of many podcasts coming up this year. Well, my 2023 so far has been writing this book, and I thought I'd in this podcast just share with everybody the steps I've gone through to write the first draft of the book. Now, one of the modules that is coming on in the pipeline that's almost done is a module on publishing. And so if you're a monthly or annual subscriber, you'll get access to that. And I'll be in that module. I'm talking about how to get a book contract, book proposals, et cetera, mainstream publishing versus self-publishing. But as I'm actually in the heat of it at the moment, and I've just finished my first draft, I thought I'd tell you about it and divulge some inside information. Nobody knows this yet, and so this will only be for the annual members and monthly members, because I can't let this news spread too widely. So, Esteban, is all right if I just kind of talk about this first draft? And in fact, what I want to just give you an outline is what came before the first draft and what's coming after the second draft. But it's primarily uh, the guidelines I abided by in writing the first draft, which was my goal to write 60,000 words in 45 days. In fact, I did within 34 days. And I'm now starting the second draft. But just to say what came before it. Well, what came before it was first of all a book proposal, which I pitched to a number of agencies, not directly, sometimes through intermediaries and an agent, and turned down. Used to being turned down, but then a London-based publisher did look at the proposal, and we signed a contract. I have written 9 books. This will be my 9th book, in fact. And a couple of those were private commissions where I was hired to write a book, but most of them were where we had a contract with a publisher. The first 3 books I co-wrote with others, and then I was brave enough to go solo. I'm not a best-selling author. I'm not a great writer, but I'm a lucky writer because while there's many writers better than me, I've been lucky enough to get contracts and seen my books go into several languages. In fact, the theme book for the Academy, Never Too Late, 10 Tips to Change the Course of Your Life, which is now in video form, largely on this platform as well. That went into 4 languages. They sold the Russian rights, the Portuguese rights. I have a phone call coming in. Just a moment.
No,
Just a moment. This is going to be interesting.
Mhm.
A Brent. Hey Brent, you've just come in live into a podcast. You can't see, but I'm in a podcast. In fact, I'll take the phone off because this is just a secondary testing. And there's Esteban. That's my brother Brent.
Hey, nice to meet you.
And Brent is the first one who came up with the term "never too later."
Oh, that's great.
Yeah, and he's a never too later. In fact, Brent is coming in May to officiate my son's wedding, Mackenzie's wedding.
Oh, nice.
And it's in Kamakura, not too far from where you live.
Yeah.
And so you got to meet Brent, and we'll do a podcast with him. Never too late to build a tiny house.
Nice.
So
on that note, Lowell, I'm just going to give your son the date I need to return. Do you have plans for me after the wedding?
You set your dates. You're going to come, and then wherever my boat is, we'll go get on the boat and sail.
Okay, so I need to stay another week after the wedding so you and I can have some fun.
Absolutely. Okay.
Get into trouble. So never too late, is Rick. Get it out.
Okay. Bye.
All right, bye.
I'll turn Tokyo upside down. Okay, bye.
Okay, bye.
Great.
Okay, bye. Okay, let me just go back and get this video in again. Okay.
No worries, well, that's great.
You get well, because I heard it ringing and I thought I either ignore it or let me just start this again. Okay.
Well, that's actually pretty interesting. I didn't know that he came up with the term.
He came up with the term, and yeah. So I don't know whether this will stay in the cut or not. That was my brother Brent, and if you search Brent Shepard, you'll see all his movie and TV credits. He's kind of like me in the TV and movie world. I would say more successful because he's got over 200 credits to his name.
Oh, wow.
Not famous, hasn't made millions of dollars off it, but he's had a career as an actor over the years, and in Canada kind of became famous for a time with an A&W commercial. He's known as the Fancy Smancy Man. So, and he'll be a great one to have in a podcast in the future.
Oh yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
Let's have him when he's coming over.
So back to the book. So so you know, I've done 9 books. You always have to have a book proposal. In the book proposal, you have to have biographical details, of course, also a synopsis of the book and a chapter outline. And that proposal then guides you in your writing. So all that came before, and then a contract being signed. And now I have some deadlines. My usual practice has been, or experience is, I have to write 4 to 5 drafts before I submit to the publisher, before it goes through their editorial process. One book I wrote called Boys Becoming Men, which was about male adolescent development and the role that the puberty rites of passage should play in a boy being accepted into manhood. That was 19 drafts before the publisher would accept it, and then it still went through their process because that was a very difficult book to write. I'm wanting to do this one in 3 drafts. So I'm taking a lot of what I've learned and trying to be very disciplined. And the first draft I've just finished. The goal was 60,000 words, but the contract is only for 40 to 50,000. Okay, so I just want to tell you the guidelines for my first draft, and maybe I've got the notes in front of me so I remember what they are. The first thing is, when writing, to find a place and a time to write. And the reason I'm in a writing room is because it's a neutral space. Pretty well every book I've written before, I find a room in somebody else's establishment. I've used a church vestry. I've used an international school music room during summer holidays, and various other places, and a shed in the back of my house, and a log cabin in the mountains. This time it's a small office of a fellow boat owner, a local fisherman stroke entrepreneur. And I said, all I need is a bed and a desk. So he put a bed in his office, and I'm here. I won't turn the camera around because the bed's over there and it's unmade. And I've set this up for the podcast. So the reason why I want a neutral space is because if I'm in the boat or at home, I look around and there's things that remind me of other things I have to do. So here, there's only his stuff, and none of them trigger a sense of duty or guilt because I'm not doing anything. So that's number one, a place and time. And the advantage of this place is I can get up anytime when the inspiration comes and I can write, which is often middle of the night if I wake up with a turn of phrase. And I only usually sleep 2 hours at a time anyway. So the second thing is, going back to the outline, live with your outline. Be thinking about it, dreaming about it, pondering it, but know that the outline needs to be a living outline, and you're not slave to to the literal bullet points itself. It will adjust and be dynamic as you go along. So, for example, as I have first created my outline, it had 3 parts. Part 1 was my story. Part 2 was a 4-step program to realizing a dream. and part 3 was tips and tools. The publisher's reaction was they wanted more of my story. They didn't feel I was giving enough time to that because in part it's meant to be an armchair adventure as well as a self-help book. And so as I began writing my story, I realized that, yeah, they were right. And I mustn't write it just as a chronology of this happened here and this happened then. But actually, as I began to write, I realized that I need to write more of a memoir, because a memoir allows me to not go just on a timeline, but go on themes and write in scenes as well. And also, as I began to write, I realized that some things I was writing belonged in a more reflective section. So I've added part 4, which is reflections. And my idea is to format into 4 8-day cycles where you can read for 30 to 90 seconds, something that's kind of like a devotional, something to meditate on, something, most importantly, is to trigger your own profound thoughts. And so as I've been writing, the outline is dynamic and it's changed somewhat. So just to repeat what the outline is, part 1 is Memoirs of a Misfit Dreamer, how a never in a million years believer turned into a never too later. That's my story. And I reveal things in that which I've never revealed before. And it's not intentional from the point of view of making that a marketing ploy, but rather I thought being honest with myself as a never too later. And the theme dare to dream. Why? How is that word dare relevant to me? And so when I dug deep, I realized that I grew up with a great sense of feeling a misfit, an outsider. I was diagnosed with a disability, a learning disability, as it was described later. At the time, the doctors were warning my parents that I may be using the term they used in the 50s, mentally retarded, because I couldn't speak till I didn't utter a word that was comprehensible till I was 3 years old. And so it's caused me to kind of go back to that. And then in hindsight, looking at medical research, I figure I was just mildly autistic because I displayed all the symptoms. But at that time, autism wasn't fully explored nor understood in its wider context. And my first few schools, I went to special classes because I was different. But eventually, those things I realized about myself were, on one hand, I felt dumb. On the other hand, I felt like, am I smarter than everybody else? Because I realized that I seemed to process stuff and could come to conclusions quickly, whereas others had to ponder something for such a long time. And I'm not saying I am smarter than everybody else, but I had this conflicting, like, am I stupid or am I really smart? And it wasn't like I'm somewhere in between. Like, I'm one or the other, but I'm probably the first. I'm probably a misfit. So this is where the memoir thing comes out. And at age 10, I had a dream which made that sense of being the misfit feel worse, because I had a dream of being a global adventurer. It was a literal dream in the middle of the night that woke me up, an epiphany of sorts. Not everybody has that. But it only increased my feeling like that'll never happen. No, shit only happens to me. I can't make shit happen. But at age 12, I made a decision where I thought, no, I can actually affect the trajectory of my life and do something. And so I'm just divulging some stuff in the memoir part. And then part 2 is that 4-step program where it's use alliteration, use the letters of DARE, dare, and what the 4 steps are. And then part 3 is just lots of tips and tools, practical things that I've learned along the way of how to accomplish something. They're both mental tools, as well as physical tools, and then this set of reflections. So the outline has to live, and it's lived for me. And and one little segment that came to me, and it's in the, I don't know whether to put it in the tool section or the reflective section yet. It's in tools at the moment. It's learning the art of swearing, how to use swear words judiciously. And it's lessons I learned from my father, and then my mother, and my son, and a theologian. That even in the Bible, in the Old Testament, prophets would use the equivalent of the modern day F-bomb to make a point. And in recent years, I've heard my mother use the F-bomb, which was shocking, given that she was a minister's wife. We had never heard her swear before in her life, but she used it in just the right way at the right time, in the face of something that was going to overcome her. And she just realized the only thing she could do, and it was in the spirit of the prophets of the Old Testament, when all else fails, just say, fuck you. And it has a release of energy. I think the F-bomb is used far too liberally, personally. I cringe when I hear it in just everyday language. But when it's used, and words, in fact, the theme in the book as well is using words precisely. And I'm not saying I'm all that good at it, but there's something about precision in the use of words, and something I learned to appreciate living in England, where the English language is more highly valued, perhaps. I mean, the language is always valued, but talk to a 7-year-old in England, and their vocabulary is extensive. Right. So that's the second thing, is that your outline is living. The third thing that's guided me is, as I've learned from other authors, is with the first draft, just pour your words onto the paper. Nobody else will read it. It doesn't matter. Spelling, typos, grammar, syntax. I wish I was a talented writer so that my first draft was picture perfect and grammar perfect and syntax perfect. But I'm not. So my first draft is really bad. It's really sketchy, etc. But it doesn't matter. Pour the words on the paper. And as I wrote my first draft, to help me, I decided every day to post how many words I'd written and what tip that I took on board that day to help me in my writing. And so I was able to take the 60,000 words and divide it down to 45 days, and on average 14 to 1,500 words a day. But the tip on the first day is just start pouring stuff on paper. And in fact, in just starting, it wasn't a blank sheet of paper, because I've got a life behind me. And so I was able to review blogs, my private notes, my private journals, my memories, my videos. So already there was a reservoir of life experience, recorded and not recorded. And I was able to take that and then pour it onto paper, either longhand with pen, I have a set of pens, or write onto the screen. And that first draft then becomes the raw material. This is now it. And I may end up writing more stuff, but it gives me the raw material to work with. Then more practically, in terms of writing techniques, again, learning from other authors, the fourth thing is write in short sentences. Number 5, beware of adjectives. And number 6, avoid the passive tense. And state of being words like is, being, was, etc., etc. So all that guided me in the first draft. And now I'm on to my second draft. And my second draft, my objective is reduced from 60K to 45 to 47K, to really watch out for that passive voice. And now I bring in more the creative side, where the old adage for writing is show, don't tell. So rather than state something, describe how that thing is. And that's not my phrase, show not tell. So that's a creative challenge. So instead of saying Esteban was angry when he put the the book on the desk, I say uh, with furrowed lips and flushed cheeks, Esteban slammed the book on the desk. Now you can visualize it. You never had to say Esteban was angry. I just described your action. So that's where I am. That's the second draft, and I have to submit to the publisher by February 20th. I'm contractually obligated, and there are sanctions if I don't. So I'm hoping to get to a third draft. So that's it, folks. That's my my first draft. Again, most of that will be inside the paywall, and go over and check out the publishing module. It should be online soon. So, and I just find I'm not a good writer, but I find writing cathartic. How about you? Do you write?
No, but actually,
And in which language do you write?
Yeah, to be honest, actually, I haven't really written like a book, but I really wanted to get into it, and actually, I've been trying to just experiment with blogs like last year, and yeah, I always wanted to actually put up like content on like my experiences, my knowledge, my skills, everything, and it's very interesting because also in a certain sense, I do write, but I have been writing more like reports or like plans or like conceptual ideas for projects, things like that. And I realized actually you use kind of like a lot of the basic rules or mindsets that you use for writing a book into when you write actually reports or plans for marketing or businesses. So that's actually very interesting because in a certain sense, I mean, it's also writing, but it's just a different format and a different goal at the end of the day. But pretty much the same rules and the same tips actually do apply. So that's actually very, very interesting, and it's very very useful to actually apply those over the
So
in the future.
you speak Spanish, Italian, English, Japanese coming up. Anything else?
No, I used to know French, to be honest, before. Like back in high school, actually, my high school was like trilingual. Like we used to study Spanish, English, and French, and I used to know a lot of French, but I didn't really use it for like well over a decade, and I pretty much forgot about it. So I might have just like a really basic level of French by now. But usually when I write, most of the time, and even on like my head, I use English because I just got used to actually a lot of my friends. Actually, even back then, from when we were in high school, we had a lot of friends who were like very like international, like all over the place. So we ended up using English as just the main language to communicate among our friends. But I do use Spanish with like close friends and family, and Italian with my family from my mother's side.
So when you say when you write you use English, what about though when you're in your creative thought, in a creative idea, which language does that come to? Like the Spanish or Italian lend itself to creative thought more than English, or?
So I will say recently it's more like actually it's English, pretty much English most of the time. I kind of got used to actually like my inner voice being English. Sometimes I did have like I was kind of doing almost like a mix between Spanish and English, like Spanglish.
Okay.
But to be honest, yeah, I think I ended up realizing that I ended up having more vocabulary in English because probably I read a lot more in English, and not only on the web, like on articles, blogs, but also in books. It was actually quite easier to get books in English rather than in the other languages. So yeah, I'm probably like way more fluent and like used to just using English rather than the Spanish.
Interesting. So maybe sometime in the future we'll have to get look at some content on It's Never Too Late to Learn a Language.
Yeah, indeed.
Because at the moment I confess that I'm probably if you were to say it is too late to learn a language, I may be an example of that because I struggle with languages. Although I think my own theory with languages actually, because I've seen older people get languages down as well. I think some people are wired for it more than others. And with my neurological disorder, which was how it was described back then, I had a neurological disorder. It had to do with language, obviously, because I couldn't speak. So I blame it on that, anyways. But I envy people like you. And my good, I have a friend known as the Brain Guy in Canada, and he was saying basically it's never too early to learn a language, because whatever that part of the brain is where you learn languages, uh, when you're younger, whatever language you're learning, and second and third language, it's all in that same part of the brain, the same set of neurons being in that area being added, etc. Later in life, when you learn a language, the brain has to construct a new section.
Mm-hmm.
And again, I can't speak technically with the scientific description of that, but I thought, well, that kind of makes sense, I guess, why
Mm-hmm.
it can be a struggle. And just everybody too, in the future, Esteban, we're going to get him to do some content on content creation, because I think it's never too late. There's many of you want to tell the story, you want to leave a legacy for your family, grandchildren, and you may be already proficient with social media platforms, you may not be, but Esteban brings a wealth of knowledge from his experience working with Red Bull and other brands in extending reach, telling the story effectively, so that people will listen and people will hear. So we'll do that in the future sometime, Esteban.
Yeah, definitely. I'm looking forward to actually sharing a lot of my knowledge and experiences with everyone.
Great. And also by the end of the year, we'll be adding in other contributors too. There's plans for that. So lots to come in 2023. Thank you for becoming a member. And we want to create a forum too, where we can be interactive. So bear with us. I don't know whether there'll be a Zoom call, a webinar, special groups. Esteban is going to be working on how we grow the community, and particularly the community within who are the monthly and annual subscribers. So if you're not a monthly or annual subscriber, check it out. We've decided, rather than try to sell things individually, just make the whole site available to everybody on a monthly or annual basis. And click on the link here or wherever Esteban puts it for us to go to. So and then join us the next time for Harry Hill and the UFC gym. He will actually be at his gym. I won't be. I'll be in my writing room, but Esteban, you'll be joining Harry in his gym on the mat, and we'll be hearing from Harry what it takes to start a fight, because one of their themes is, what's your fight? And we all want to fight for something, and we in the academy want to learn and encourage each other to fight for our dreams. So have a great day, everybody, and thanks for watching the first podcast of the Never Too Late Academy. Thanks, Esteban.
Thanks to you, Lowell. Thanks everyone for watching. See you next time.